We've been talking for several weeks now about the idea of having the right image of who God is. That having the right image of who He is really critical to every part of our lives. Your filter of how you look at anything in life really is determined about what your picture is of God. Even if you don't believe there is a God, that's affecting the way you look at life. Your picture of who He is affects how you view life. It determines whether you have hope or not. You can believe in God, but if you don't have the right picture of Him, you don't have hope. There's a lot of things related to that. Then there's also the idea that you're created in His image and likeness, which means if you don't know what He's like, you don't really even know what you're like. Like, what do you mean I don't know what I'm like? I've lived with myself for most of my life. There was that little period of time. But if you don't know who He is, you don't really know who you are. So we want to have the right picture of who God is, and the best way to get that picture is to find out what He said about who He is. Because there's a lot of people who have ideas about who God is and what He's about and what He does and what He doesn't do. But He actually told us. We've been studying out of the book of Exodus because Moses is the first person that we see that truly asks God, who are you? What are you about? And I believe God answers him simply because he asked. And so we ask these questions, and throughout the book of Exodus, God reveals these little pieces about who He is. But here in Exodus 34, this has been our foundation scripture for this, is God explaining some things that are very important about who He is that He needs Moses to know, and things He needs us to know. So Exodus chapter 34, I'm kind of doing a little bit of review of where we were last week because, remember I told you last week we couldn't get all the way through the thought. I told you you needed to be back this week to hear it. And so you're here, and that's good. Exodus 34, verse 6, and the Lord passed before him and proclaimed, the Lord God, merciful and gracious. Right, that's where he started. First thing you want to know, I'm merciful and gracious. Long-suffering or slow to anger. Remember he said that his anger is far, and His mercy is near. Right, so he's suffering long, or he's patient, or he's slow to anger. And then we started last week in abounding in goodness and truth. That to say has some goodness and truth. The idea of goodness and truth, either you are good or you're not. You are truthful or you're not. The way these words were translated, some of your other translations would use the words, He is abounding in love and faithfulness. Why are there different words being used? It seems so radically different because these words that were used here in Hebrew for love and faithfulness were hesed and emet. But they're words that don't translate really well to English. You have very broad, large meanings that go beyond a single word. And so each translator kind of picked out a different part or key part of what that word means. But it's the picture of when God says love is way bigger than ours. We don't really get it. Our love is based on emotion, feeling. There are conditions upon it, but God's picture of love is different. And so he's painting this picture. Not only is he saying this, he says that it's abounding. So however much that you need, He has more. There's never a point that you exhaust His love and His faithfulness. And so we began looking at the idea. Okay, so God, this is what God said He is. All these things that He said He is. But we also have to reconcile that with sometimes we look at life, and if we have the wrong picture of God is, we don't have understanding, we can't reconcile things like, okay, so God is love and He's faithful, so why do these things go on in my life? Why does my life look like it does if God is full of love and that He's faithful? And so this is where I said last week we were laying a little bit of groundwork and you need to stick with me because we're going to get a little bit further on this today. That we have to, whether we reconcile that question ourselves or not, determines really the kind of relationship we're going to have with God. I believe there are a lot of Christians who live a life loving and serving God because they know that's what they're supposed to do, but they're distant from God because they have these questions. Okay, I know you said you're full of love and you're faithful, but what gives? What's up? Why is this going on in my life? Why does my life look like it does if this is who you are? And so we want to get to, I'm not going to give you the specific, probably not the specific answer to your specific issue, but I want to equip you to answer the question, which to me is better because you can agree or disagree with me, and my answer to your question. I want to lead you to where you can get the answer to your question. Okay. So as we get into this, we want to get this proper perspective on dealing with the but why. And so to do that, and this is where we began last week, is we have to understand some things about covenant, the relationship, what a covenant relationship looks like. And so over in Genesis chapter 12, we're just going to read real quickly as a sake of review to catch us up to speed. Genesis chapter 12, God is making a covenant with Abraham. Now, at this point, his name is still Abram. God changes his name a little bit later as part of affirming his covenant. Genesis chapter 12, verse 1, now the Lord had said to Abram, get out of your country, from your family, and from your father's house to a land that I will show you. I will make you a great nation. I will bless you and make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. And I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse him who curses you, and in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. So God's picture of a covenant is different than ours. Because you notice something about God's covenant is all about I will, I will, I will, I will. See, covenant is usually about both parties saying I will. I'll do this, you'll do that. You'll do that, I'll do this. You bring this to the table, I bring this to the table. But God, his whole covenant is I will, I will, I will. Now he does ask one thing of Abraham, doesn't he? He says, paraphrasing, just come with me. That's all I'm asking. You come with me and I will, I will, I will. That's all he's asking. Just trust me and come with me. That's the covenant that God makes with us. That's what his covenant looks like. So let's take it a little bit further. We go a little bit further down this road in this covenant. So God makes some promises to Abraham. Abraham is bringing nothing to the table. That's one of the things we have to understand about our covenant, our relationship with God, is we bring nothing to the table, except the one thing he wants most is just come with me. That's what he wants. That's all he wants. The rest of it is all about what he'll do, and what we do is in a response to what he does. Okay, so we begin down this road. So we get over to a couple chapters later, chapter 15. And God has made this promise to Abraham. He said, I'm gonna bless you. So all of the families or the nations of this earth will be blessed through your offspring. Okay, so remember when God makes this promise to him, he's 75 years old. And his wife, same. She's been barren, unable to have a child. From what we read, he could possibly still make it happen, but it's pointless. She's barren. So here they are in chapter 15, and Abraham is going to have his God, what's up conversation. Right? And so, as we've pointed out, God is okay with the what's up conversation. He wants you to bring it to him. He doesn't want you just to worship on a very surface level with this what's up question under the surface. Right? So it's always going to hinder the relationship. So it's better for you to go to him with the what's up. And this is what Abraham does. So chapter 15, it says, after these things, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision, saying, do not be afraid, Abram. I am your shield, your exceedingly great reward. But Abram said, this is his what's up, Lord God, what will you give me, seeing I go childless, and the heir of my house is Eliezer of Damascus? Then Abram said, he's going to speak the problem twice. Look, you have given me no offspring. Indeed, one born of my house is my heir. Okay, so I think what's happening with Abraham here, he's like, hey, 3 chapters ago, you made me a promise. Well, it probably wasn't written that way yet. Some time has passed. You made me a promise. It doesn't look like it's happening. God, what's up? But then sometimes, I think we can identify with this. God has made a promise. We haven't seen it come to pass. So we look at what we have around us and try to rationalize how maybe God actually meant this. Oh, I see. You promised me an heir. Maybe if I think about it, technically he didn't say. So maybe this child who is a child of one of the servants in my house is an heir. So I get it. Is that what you meant, God? And so what's God's response? And behold, the word of the Lord came to him saying, this one shall not be your heir, but one who will come from your own body shall be your heir. Okay, so we set them straight. Right? We have to make sure that we don't fall short of what God's promised us and then rationalize it away and think, well, that's not what God really meant. Right? So God sets them straight. It's what I meant is you are going to have an heir. Now, fast forward a little bit. Spoiler alert. He messes it up again, but he gets closer. He goes, okay, so then he has a child from his body, but wasn't his wife's. And that's a whole other story. Verse 5, then, so after he told him, no, you are going to have an heir, that says, then he brought him outside and he said, look now toward heaven and count the stars if you're able to number them. And he said to him, so shall your descendants be. So remember, he gives him a picture to look at. Right? He's going to be able to see this every night. Look up in the sky and be reminded that God made him a promise. Sometimes we have to continually be reminded of God's promise. It's easy to forget. How could we forget? It was such a big promise, and I'm so excited about it, but we forget about it. Right? Sometimes there's been something that God put in your heart. You were so excited about it, but time went by and it didn't seem like it was coming to pass, so you just kind of moved on. And you forgot about it. So God gives him something to help him not forget. Look up in the sky. When you see that, it's going to remind you every single night, I made you a promise. If it hasn't come to pass yet, look up in the sky. I made you a promise. Then he says, and he believed in the Lord, and he accounted it to him for righteousness. Abraham was considered righteous before God, therefore worthy, qualified to receive anything that he needed, qualified to receive whatever God promised. Why? Because he believed. It doesn't say Abraham was very obedient and he followed every single thing perfect and to the letter, so therefore he was considered righteous and could inherit the promise. No, he just believed God. Went back to the first thing he told him to do. Just come with me. Come on this adventure. Trust me. That's all I'm asking. So, verse 7, then he said to him, I am the Lord who brought you out of Ur of the Chaldeans to give you this land to inherit it. And he said, Lord God, how shall I know that I will inherit it? Okay, so the question he's asking is I'm going to simplify it. How will I know that you'll do what you promised? How am I going to know that? Right, it's an honest question. How am I going to know? So what's God's response? He said to him, bring me a 3-year-old heifer, a 3-year-old female goat, and a 3-year-old ram, and a turtle dove, and a partridge in a pear tree. You don't need any lords of leaping at this point. And a young pigeon. So he says, bring these to me. Then he brought all these to him, and he cut them in two. This is where it gets a little gruesome. Down the middle, and he placed each piece opposite the other, but he didn't cut the birds in two. I mean, because who wants to cut a bird in two? I mean, really, he didn't have the small tools for cutting a bird in two. So this is an interesting response. He asked God, how will I know that you're going to be faithful? And he goes, go get some animals and cut them in half. Okay, sure. But it wasn't as odd as it would seem. Well, let's read another couple of verses here. It says, when the vultures came down and the carcasses, Abram drove them away. There's always going to be the doubt and the fear and the unbelief that wants to come and steal right in the middle when God's trying to show you what you need. Amen. This is what happens here. And what did Abram do? He drove it away. Get out of here. You don't want out of here. Now, when the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell upon Abram, and behold, horror and great darkness fell on him. So now God causes him to go in this deep sleep. He wants to show him something. Now, this picture that God's about to use. So it seems like odd that God uses this to answer his question. Remember, the question is, how will I know you're going to be faithful? So he has him cut these animals in half. Seems maybe a bit random to us, but it's not. See, God uses blood as a picture of covenant throughout the Bible. But this one is very specific. Right? It's the only place I actually find where he talks about cutting animals in half and then splitting them. And okay, so why? Because he's using a picture that Abraham would understand. See, in his day, this is the way that you marked a covenant agreement between two parties. Is you cut animals in half, you split them, and the two making the agreement would walk down the center between the split carcasses. This is so gruesome. I'm sure a woman didn't come up with this. This is guys going, yeah, mark a covenant. And the two would walk through, and it was in essence saying that if either of us does not follow through with what we're committing to this day, let this be us. Let this be me if I don't keep my word. And trust me, they'd hold you to it. So watch what happens next. Verse 13, then he said to Abraham, know certainly that your descendants will be strangers in a land that is not theirs, and will serve them, and they will afflict them for 400 years. Now he's speaking prophetically to him of things that are going to happen. But think about what he's speaking to him. For this to come to pass, then the promise he made had to have happened. For your people to now be a people and a nation who could be captive means that what I've already operated on the assumption what I told you has happened. This is what's going to happen after that. And also, the nation whom they serve, I will judge afterward. They shall come out with great possessions. He's talking about the day that the Israelites come out of Egypt. When they leave Egypt, they were slaves, they walked out free and with all of the possessions, all of the wealth of Egypt. And they didn't have to take sword and demand it. They just gave it to him and said, here, take it, go, just leave. God was speaking prophetically to him about his descendants. Now, as for you, you shall go to your fathers in peace. You shall be buried in a good old age. I like good old age. But in the fourth generation they shall return here, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet complete. Okay, now watch this next part. And it came to pass when the sun went down, and it was dark, that behold, there appeared a smoking oven and a burning torch, which I can't get all the imagery here, but he was showing him a picture of himself as God. And that passed between the two pieces. And this is on the same day the Lord made a covenant with Abram, saying, to your descendants I have given you the land and the river of Egypt and then a whole lot of ites that you're gonna defeat. So what did God just do here? He used a picture that Abraham would get. He knew how covenant agreements were made. Right? We split the carcasses, we both walk through and we make a promise. But what did God do? He showed him that only he walked through. What was he saying? Let it be for me like that if I should ever break my word with you. See, but I didn't hold you to it. You didn't walk through that. You didn't make an agreement that said you'll always be faithful. This is what God was telling him. There's going to be times that you'll be unfaithful, but I will always be faithful. You know why he doesn't have Abram walk that? Because God will not tempt you, put you in a position that you can't, or something you can't do. He wouldn't demand Abraham declare that he will always be faithful because Abraham won't always be faithful. He's not demanding you will always be faithful because you will not always be faithful. Right? We all made our agreements with God. Lord, if you will just do this, I will. And did you will? Right? Those things you promised, did you will? Did you do it? No. Right? Because we can't. And God does not demand of you what is not possible. Now, look what happened, though, in Exodus 19, when God was bringing the law, the people had a whole lot of we will. God said, I'm going to bring my commands, I'm going to show you how to live. And they said, we will do everything you say. So really, they were given 613 I wills. Every one of the commands. I will. And God said, okay, good luck with that. We can't. We have to begin to learn when we're in those difficult situations, when we're faced with the question of God, why is this going on? And we don't go to God with what we will do. Lord, I will. No, we need to go to God with, God, you said you would. God, I know you said that you would do this, and you would, and I'm trusting you. And when you trust him, it's credited to you as righteous. When you are righteous, you are one who inherits all the promises. We have to go to him with that position of, he did, not what I did. Sometimes I did some good things, or at least I thought they were good. Sometimes I did some not so good things, but it's not about the I did. It's about the he did. So this is the picture that he gives Abraham. I want you to see this. This promise that I'm making you to have all these descendants for this land, all this promise I'm making you. Right? So he made a promise to him that really, when he says he was going to bless all of the nations of the earth through his descendant, he's talking about Jesus, and we're living in that blessing of what was promised. God was using this situation. I want you to take another step back and looking at this. You know, sometimes we think that God, if he's going to call us to do something big, like this is a big thing. It's like a top 5 big things in the Bible. Right? Because God is instituting a plan that's going to bring ultimately about his son to come as our Savior through this promise. We sometimes think that if God's going to call me to something big, he's going to make me do something I don't want to do. I'm afraid to tell God, I'll do whatever you want me to do. Because what if he wants me to go live in a hut in Africa and I don't even speak their language and I definitely don't like the food. Like me, I'm always waiting for the time that Pastor Jason's going to tell me he needs me to go check on the school and the church in Uganda. Because I'm like, how many protein bars can I eat over that time? Once that trip comes, I will be done with protein bars for the rest of my life. We're always afraid, well, what's God? He's going to make me do something I don't want to do. You know that in this story, what did he do? Now think about Abraham and Sarah. 75 years old and barren. For 75 years, or at least for as long as they've been adults, they have longed and desired for a child. They've wanted that more than anything else and never had it. God was going to use the desire of their hearts to get his will done. The word tells us that he gives us the desires of our hearts. Why? He puts them there because he's going to use them to do something. He always has a bigger picture involved. He likes to bless you through the desire of your heart and then use the desire of your heart to bring blessing. This is what he does with Abraham. Right? They've spent their entire lives longing and probably figured it's never going to happen. It's the desire of our heart that has never happened. And so then we found chapter 12, the promise was made, but now chapter 15, it still hasn't happened. And so Abraham's having well, what's up? You got my hopes up. And nothing's happening. So God's response to him was to remind him of the promise. And now he makes this covenant. He wants him to know that this promise coming to pass is on me, not on you. And I will do it. Okay, so now, let's take it a little further. All right, so I said, he's not going to put a demand on you that you can't fulfill. Right? He didn't make Abraham promise all his I wills. In 1 Corinthians chapter 10, I just said that moment was a top 5 important moment in the Bible. This is probably a top 5 grossly misquoted scripture. So what I'm about to say, if you've ever walked up to me and said this, don't worry, I didn't judge you. Because, it just means someone just taught you wrong. Okay, so 1 Corinthians, chapter 11, that doesn't look like the right verse. 10, verse 13. No temptation has overtaken you except such as is common to man, but God is faithful, right? Say God is faithful. God is faithful, right? Who will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you are able, but with temptation will also make a way of escape that you may be able to bear it. How this gets grossly misquoted is God won't give you more than you can handle. So what are we doing? We're accepting a whole lot of junk in life going, well, God must think I'm really strong because he's given me this stuff to bear. No, that's not what this is talking about. And this is the verse that's being used because that phrase is nowhere else in the Bible. No, what does he say? He won't allow you to be tempted, just like with Abraham. I feel like he had to put him in a deep sleep so Abraham wouldn't make a promise. I think he could have showed it to him without making him sleep. If you're sleeping, you won't go, okay, so now I'll do, and I promise I'll do. No. I just want to show you what I'm going to do. I want to show you this is me. Don't you make a promise. Your promise, you're human. Your promise isn't as good as the oxygen you just used to make it. Right? So he said he won't allow you to be tempted beyond what you can bear. And then James goes on and tells us in chapter 1 that he is not a tempter. Let no one say God is tempting me. Or the thing that you carry around, that you're dealing with, the thing that you're asking God, what's up, he didn't give it to you. He didn't give it to you to test you, to grow you. Now, you may have found it some other way, and he's finding a way to use it to grow you and develop you, but he didn't bring it to you. God is not the author of those things. But if you find him, he'll help you use it to do something with it. Okay, now let's keep going with this. So we fast forward to Jesus. This is where I think God is just so brilliant. Like the promise he made with Abraham is pretty ironclad. Like he showed him, this isn't you, it's all me. But we still misunderstand it. Then let's bring Jesus. Jesus comes, and he's a man, and he's faithful. And then we're told we're joint heirs with him. He's the perfect one. He was, even if you thought you needed to be faithful to earn any of this, he did it. And then he said, I did it, and now because I did it, you get it. Now remember, what was that picture? It said, if any of us breaks this word, let this come upon me. Well, he didn't break his word, and he still took it on. Add another layer to it. That he even paid the price that he didn't have to pay. He paid the price of one who had broken a covenant when he hadn't. He's covered all the bases. He wants you to get that the promise is yours, and if you haven't got it, it's not because he's not faithful. He's faithful beyond faithful. That's who he is. Okay, but over in the book of Nehemiah, in chapter 9, we don't have time to go there, but you can read this. Nehemiah has gone back to rebuild Jerusalem. He's building the wall, and what a statement that he makes, he gets it. He says, you know what? We have been unfaithful, God, but you are always faithful. So that you can hear people say things like, well, you look in the Bible, look at God's people. These are his own people, and he's supposedly faithful. Look at everything that happened to them. Well, but when you look at it, when you take it away from being a soundbite and actually read the stories, you find out that whatever calamity they found is when they turned away from God and went their own way. And every time they called out to him, he was faithful. That's the picture we ought to be getting. Even when we're unfaithful, he stays faithful. He just wants us to once again get back on the adventure with him. Come back to him. That's all he's asking. Okay. Where did I tell you to go? I didn't tell you to go anywhere yet. 2 Timothy chapter 2. I'll show you this in the New Testament. Well, Pastor, that's all Old Testament stuff you're telling me. 2 Timothy 2, verse 13. If we are faithless, he remains faithful. He cannot deny himself. Remember that these things that God is telling us what he is are not just adjectives that apply in certain situations. They are the core of who he is. They aren't just a description of something he's done, but they are who he is. For him to not be faithful is for him to not be who he is. He can't not be who he is. So he's faithful. Even when we are faithless, he is faithful. Okay, so we have all that. But you're still going, okay, but still, what's up? Right, well, if God's faithful, then why did I end up in an ugly divorce and I'm stuck with 4 kids and an alimony check that even if I get it, doesn't cover the rent? I thought God was faithful. Okay, so God's faithful. Why did I have to look for a year to find a job and I finally got it? I'm just finally getting the bills paid and 2 weeks later they laid me off. I thought God was faithful. Right, so we got to reconcile these questions because we don't want this division in our relationship with God. So I told you we needed to understand covenant first to understand this. We need to understand, what did he promise in his covenant? He didn't promise Abraham, it's going to be all rainbows and unicorns. And if you just follow me, nothing bad's ever going to happen to you in your life. No, of course not. What was his promise? That he would always be with him, he'd always be faithful, and he would bless him. He never said nothing difficult was ever going to happen. He promised to be faithful when it did, but he's God. He's God. Can't he just make it so those things don't happen? Well, here's the thing. And this may be a little deeper. It may also rub against what you believe. So just stick with me. So God doesn't always get his will. You're like, you kind of agree with him when you think about it. It sounds weird. You say God doesn't get his will. Why would Jesus tell us we had to pray for it? If it happens, Jesus had to pray for it. He's Jesus, and he had to pray for it. He tells us, pray for God's will. So that means that there must be a lot of things going on that aren't God's will. Now, part of what he did in loving us is give us a will that we can make decisions. And so, we're believers, and we do our best to try to make decisions in line with what his will is, but we don't do it all the time. And then let's just be honest. A lot of people that don't even believe in God, they're definitely not making decisions in line with God's will. So there's a lot of wills in play. God's is the greatest. And I believe wholeheartedly that he has nothing for you in his will except for blessing and prosperity and health and peace. That's what his will is. And I can give you all kinds of scriptures to try to prove it to you, but I'll tell you this, as Jesus gave us the example, me being even a wicked, evil father desires that for my kids. How much more does our Father in heaven? Right? I don't have 4 kids and my will is for one of them to be poor. Of course not. My will is for them to be blessed in their life. I don't have 4 kids and I want one of them to be sick their entire life because it will build character. Towards what? I don't know. No, of course not. But do I always get my will with my kids? No. I have 2 dogs and a cat, and this week 2 guinea pigs in my house. It shows I don't always get my will. No, I love pets. I just don't want to take care of them. I took care of kids. I'm done with that. You can get your own pets and you can take care of them. But God doesn't always get his will. And so we have to understand that, but he did make a promise to us though, that he'll always be faithful. That's our hope. See, because if you believe that God is bringing the calamity to your life for this reason or that reason, he's doing this, he's doing that, well, he's just in control, then you don't have hope, do you? What if I haven't learned what he's trying to teach me yet? I don't even know what he's trying to teach me. Right? We have these phrases that I think get used out of just misunderstanding and immaturity, that they're damaging our relationship with God. It sounds good to say, well, God's in control. Well, he's in control of what we allow him to be in control of, but not everything. But it's easier for us to say, well, I don't know, I guess God's just in control. No. Or maybe I'm dating myself a little bit. In the 80s, it was real big. People had their front license plate that said, God is my co-pilot. Right, but then the little bit more religious people had to say, oh, no, you're wrong. He's only your co-pilot. He's my pilot. Okay, well, that's good too, but just so you know, you're both wrong. More accurate, but less pithy and exciting to put on a license plate is more like, I think, God is my control tower. Right? Because if God's your pilot, then you're just on a plane and everything that's happening in your life is just wherever he wants to take you. That's not who God is. He's your co-pilot. Well, that's just, you just only ask him to help out if you can't fly the plane. Which is okay, he'll do it. But really, he's your control tower. What is the control tower doing? Making sure you get to your destination, telling you which way to go, keeping you safe. And you got a decision. I can listen to the control tower, or I could not listen to the control tower. To very dire consequences. That's who he is for us. We have to understand that God he has a perfect will for you that wants you blessed and wants you everything that he wanted for Abraham, everything he wanted for his kids, for Israel. He wanted all these things for them. But when they didn't do what he wanted and did what they wanted to do, right, God didn't just override it and still give them everything because they're creating messes. They're turning from him. But the moment they cry out to him, always faithful. He didn't go, well, you wouldn't listen to me. Enough of you. No. Call out to him. He's faithful. You know, and one more thing. All right, I got a couple minutes. You'd be equally excited to hear. We have to have God in control, not just in word, but in deed. Because it's easy to say, well, you know, I've prayed 100 times about this thing and told God, this is yours, I give it to you. But then we continue to be in fear and anxiety and worry and speak negatively and post on the internet negatively. Right? We do all these things. We say, I trust God. Then we do this. Well, then God's not in control. You took the control back. I said he's in control, but I'm still controlling it by what's coming out of my mouth and my thoughts is that I don't expect it to work. I don't expect him to be faithful. Right? So is that saying, because I know people say things like, well, you just telling people that all your problems because you don't have enough faith. Well, kind of, but not like that. It's not condemnation. It's just being human beings. We've got to recognize when I said I gave God control, and all of a sudden I catch myself going, wait, what am I doing? Why am I talking about this way? Why did I just tell God I trust you to take care of this for me and then figure out what's going to happen when it doesn't work? Right? I have to actually trust him. Abraham actually trusted God. He said, go. I'm not even telling you where to go. Just go. And he goes, okay. God says, I'm going to give you this child. And he says, okay, let's go. That's what he's asking for. Now, if we pull all this together, we understand what is our hope. So I told you, I'm not going to give you the specific answer to what happened in your life. We have to know some things like where our hope is. Our hope is not God's just in control. That's not hope. I got to wonder what calamity he's going to bring next. Our hope is also not in nothing bad will ever happen to me. Well, I follow God. I obey rules. Therefore, nothing bad's going to happen to me. No, there's no hope in that either, because that's not reality. Our hope is this. Our hope is in Jesus Christ. Why? Because that hope was defeat of the ultimate defeat. He overcame all evil. He overcame hell, death, and the grave. That's my hope. If my hope's in anything but that, I will always, in the end up hopeless. Because whatever my hope was in is going to crash and tumble down. But I have my hope in a God who promised he is faithful. He's always faithful. Can't be anything but faithful. Now think again. What was God's answer to Abram's what's up? Remind him of the promise. He didn't make it a bunch of excuses and try to explain it. All he did is remind him of the promise and show him the covenant. And in that covenant, remind him this is all on me. It's not on you. That's the promise. Now, he goes on and still messes it up, doesn't he? He goes after this. He has a kid the wrong way, and it creates a big mess. But then in the end, he gets it right. I think we can identify with that, can't we? Sometimes we got the promise, we messed it up completely the first time, blamed it on God. And then we may even messed it up again the second time, made an even bigger mess. But it's okay, that's how we end. How I got to the end is I remembered God was faithful, and he showed me he was faithful. Amen? Amen. If you got anything out of that this morning, give the Lord a hand.